Hello, middle school art club students. So today we are actually going to be starting a new project in art club, and that is a Dia de los Muertos sugar skull. So basically you probably have heard of the Day of the Dead and of sugar skulls, but what we're going to be doing is learning just a little bit about what Dia de los Muertos is and why it matters, why it is important, and then we are going to use tinfoil templates and some pre-designed sugar skulls to create your own sort of tinfoil painting. So you do have a couple of different options as to your sugar skull pattern. I've got this one, which is the piece that I'm going to be using for my demo. You've got this other face that you can choose from, this other sugar skull. And then we've got this one, this one, and then lastly, this one. And I do have a couple copies of each of those different ones. That way, if you and a friend want to both do the same one, you still can. So your first step is going to be to retrieve a tinfoil covered piece of cardboard. It'll be masking taped on the back so that your tinfoil is already ready to go. And then you'll decide which skull you want to use. Now the skulls have already been cut down to be the same size as the tinfoil so that you can make sure it lines up. And then you're going to trace what you see. You're going to trace your whole pattern, your whole design. I recommend not using a lead pencil for this because the lead pencil is going to be pretty sharp and we don't want to run the risk of tearing the tinfoil under the paper. The main point of the tracing portion is so that the design that is printed on the paper will go through and kind of show up a little bit on the tinfoil for the next step. So I'll go ahead and get started tracing mine. It is important to make sure that you keep your paper in the same spot. So if you want to tape it down, you can, but be careful with that because once again, we don't want to run the risk of tearing the tinfoil at all. So if you do decide to tape yours down, I recommend just using Scotch tape and taping literally the whole thing down to the table. That way the tape itself is not actually touching the tinfoil, but can still help keep everything in place for you. And then of course it is important to make sure that you kind of go in an organized fashion so that you can make sure that you trace every single part. So for some of you, being organized about it may come more naturally than others, and that's okay. Just take your time, make sure that you get all those little details traced on there. So what I'm doing is just starting from the chin up. I'm going to do everything sort of toward the bottom and work my way up to the top so that I can help myself make sure that I've got everything on there. And if I'm not sure that I've traced something, what I'm going to do is just literally trace it again because it cannot hurt to have drawn everything twice. You do want to press down kind of hard here. Once again, not so hard that you are tearing your paper, but remember we are sort of imprinting the tinfoil. So it's kind of important to make sure that you use the tip of your pencil almost as if it is going through the paper to indent the tinfoil. So again, this step does take a little bit of time, but it is worth taking your time on this step. On the teeth, I'm just going to trace the largest shape first on all of the teeth, and then I'm going to go back in and add the rest of the details on those teeth. So now that I've got the larger parts of the teeth traced, I'm going to go ahead and go in with this line in the middle. And then I'm going to go in with these smaller lines on the tops and the bottoms of each tooth. So once again, it is all about figuring out what's going to work best for you to help you make sure that you get all of the details on there. Now, if there are some details that you want to leave off, that's fine too. You do, however, want to make sure that you have enough detail on there that the idea of a very decorative sugar skull comes across clearly. So once again, just kind of moving up, holding my paper nice and steady so that it does not shift around on me. Now, one thing that is important to note is if you do go off of your line a little bit, do not try to redraw it, because if you do, then what's going to happen is you're going to have multiple lines showing up on the tinfoil where you really only need one. So for instance, on one of these leaves, if I got a little bit off with my line, I'm not going to go back and try to fix it. I'm just going to let the one line that I have be the line for that part. So again, I'm trying to stay organized, so I'm doing one thing at a time. So since I did that flower on the left, I'm going to now do the flower on the right before I continue to move up. So now I'm going to start in the inner circle on this eye. I'm going to do this whole eye before I move to the other eye. Now these little dots within this circle would be a good example of something that you could easily leave out, and the pattern is not going to be any less for leaving those little dots in that circle out. So now I'm just working on the outer petals here. Now, if you want to trace with a colored pencil so that you can see where you've made your lines a little bit more, that's fine. That's not a bad idea. Okay, now I'm going to trace this shape. Now, even though this whole shape and some of the other ones that I have traced are black on my template, that does not necessarily mean that they have to be black on my final piece. So I'm not going to color them in with the pencil at all. I'm just going to trace around the outside of them, just focusing on that shape. So now this whole eye is done. So my next thing is going to be to go ahead and do this eye. And I'm going to start the same way. I'm going to start on that inner circle. And then I'm going to move on to my petals. And then my lines to go in the petals. And then I'm going to move to the outer shape here. And then the petals that are outside. And then these dots that are in the middle going up. So still just kind of working my way up. So now the only thing that I have left to do are these flowers and the very top of the head here. So I'm going to go ahead and do those. And then the next video, I'm going to show you what the tinfoil looks like and what the next step of the process would be.